There are people around the world who cannot understand how a Europe that promotes international humanitarian law, that condemns the violation of international humanitarian law in any other place, is allowing what is happening in Gaza.
We've been very, very clear. The attacks from October 7th were an attack on Israel. Israel has the right to defend itself. Hamas is a terrorist organization. But we've also been very clear, because Israel is a democracy, because Israel is a country that is run by the rule of law, Israel has to follow the rule of law in its actions in Gaza. This is why we have been very clear and have said it is under no circumstances okay to block delivery of aid to the civilians. We've put pressure on Israel, and we've said that very, very clearly. And we've said very, very clearly that this is about freeing the hostages and nothing else. We support Israel in its attempt to free the hostages, but it is clear for us that this is the limit, no further.
But Israel is pushing the limits, some would say.
I think there are members of the government of Israel that are pushing for that, but we see very, very clearly that that is not Israel as a whole. There's a large majority of Israeli people who are saying, of course we support our fight to free the hostages and to defend ourselves against the terrorist organization Hamas, but at the same time they're saying we don't want an escalation of this conflict. And I think it is some members of the far right in Netanyahu's government that is trying to divide, not just internationally, but to divide also the Israeli population. And we've just heard yesterday and the day before from Yair Golan, who is one of the leaders of the Israeli opposition, that it is not okay, that under no circumstances it's not up to Israel's own standards to break humanitarian law. Of course, the population in Gaza needs to be protected, and we've been very, very clear about that.
Yet we see Israel intensifying its military campaign. We're told that the aid that was promised to be led into Gaza has not reached the people. What should Europe be doing to respond? So far, foreign ministers have agreed to review the EU's trade association with Israel. Does this go far enough?
I think this is, in the end, the Commission that has to decide whether the agreement still lives up to what it needs to be, and I think that is a process that we will have to do now, and we will look into that. But in the end, what we can do is to be very clear to our allies in Israel, and I say that as a German Social Democrat, as a friend of Israel, that it is also in the Israeli interest to live up to its own standards when it comes to international law. And I think that is much more conducive than trying to enter a polarized debate. I think we need to be very clear. We have to recognize the suffering on both sides. I also think we need to recognize that Hamas is not only holding 58 Israeli hostages, but that Hamas is holding 2 million Palestinian hostages, that is part of their strategy to use civilians as human shields. And I think it's really important for us as friends of Israel to tell Israel that don't go into that trap. Don't fall into that trap. Live up to your own standards. Live up to international law. That is what makes a democracy strong. And what we see in Israel is that the Israeli population and the Israeli opposition and the Israeli justice system are also very clear on that. We can't allow Netanyahu and some far-right elements to take, in some ways, the whole state of Israel hostage.
As you highlight, you are a German MEP. You're talking about traps here. There are some who've suggested, even voices in Israel, that Germany itself is falling into a particular trap. The trap that says any condemnation of Israel is somehow viewed as Germany, with its historical position, being anti-Israel.
I think for me, the distinction is very important, especially in democracy, between a government, a state, and then a group of people. The problem that I often have is that in the debates we have, also in my own country, a lot of people are equating Netanyahu's government with the state of Israel, and sometimes even with any Jew in Germany. And this is where I think it gets problematic, because then you have the real risk of anti-Semitism. What we want is to get out of this polarized debate and be able to say, of course we are allies of Israel, we stand in solidarity with Israel, with our own history as Germany, but because we are friends of Israel, we can criticize Netanyahu and his government, and we stand with our Israeli friends also in the opposition and the majority of the Israeli people who want a de-escalation of this conflict. We are clear, we want a two-state solution, and we know that the fastest way to get there is the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages on the one hand,
yes,
and for Israel to live up to its own standards and actually enter into negotiations and have an immediate ceasefire.
The Swedish foreign minister, for example, proposed sanctioning individual ministers in the Israeli cabinet. You've talked about some of those ministers. Why won't Germany support that?
Because I think if you have to still work and talk to these people, it doesn't make you basically close down communication channels. What Germany is supporting is, for instance, the sanctioning of settlers who have committed crimes. But if you want to, I'm a trained diplomat. I have to talk with people who strongly disagree with me. And I think if we want to actually make a difference in the life of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, it won't happen by just being high and mighty on our moral horse and just saying we don't talk to anybody in the Israeli government. No, we'll only be able to do that if we go and talk to them. And that doesn't happen by sanctioning members of government. That closes down communication channels rather than opening them.
But how do you show a friend, Israel, that you've gone too far? And as friends, we have to take action because we're watching the suffering of millions of people in the Gaza Strip. How does Europe do that to stop a friend going too far, if that friend hasn't gone too far already?
I mean, this is the discussions we have with our Israeli friends, and we are very clear and open about that. Our president has been in Israel, and he has been also cherishing really the incredible gift that we had and the possibility that after our history, Germany and Israel are close friends, and that because precisely of that, we can talk frankly to each other. And for instance, our president has said very clearly, we want the resumption and the opening of aid channels immediately, and had put pressure on that because we said it as a friend. And actually there has been some result, there has been some easing of these channels, and I think this is the only way to really change. I want to make the life of the people in Palestine and Israel, in the Gaza Strip and in Israel, better. I don't do that by saying like great moralistic things. I do that by really trying to have an impact when I talk to Israeli colleagues as their friend and say like, it is also in your own interest. It is your population that wants peace, so listen to your own population.
My final question, there are credible reports in the United States that the Trump administration is in talks with officials in Libya to resettle Palestinian civilians in the Gaza Strip in Libya. If this materializes somehow, how should Europe be responding to something like that?
I mean, these are hypotheticals that I had not heard about before. As I said, we are clear, like we want a two-state solution, and that means no occupation of the Gaza Strip by Israel and no displacement of people, no forced displacement. And we are clear, we've always been clear about that, and I'm very confident we'll continue to be very clear about that.